Hey guys, it's Faye from Solarflow and I am back with another video. Today's topic is a deep dive behind the veil analysis of Armie Hammer. What is going on with him? Is he really a cannibal? What was up with all of his sexual kinks that recently came to the fore? And was he always like this? What caused it? What is going on with Armie? Behind the veil. So if this sounds like an interesting topic to you, please stick around, and if not, I will catch you at another video. So, Armie Hammer, good looking guy, very, very statuesque, cleans up nicely, very good looking, chiseled. He has chiseled features, piercing blue eyes. I believe he's quite tall, and that worked very well for him in the industry that he was in Hollywood and getting movie roles. Unfortunately, it did not work out so well for him when he was growing up, and here's why. I don't know if his mother and father were together or if they were separate. I get at least energetically, so whatever, if they were married and they were together, like publicly, energetically they were not. They were very, very separate. They each lived their own separate lives, and there was a lot of energetic dysfunction in the household because of it. Armie and whatever siblings he also had were almost like toss-asides. They were emotionally neglected, and the family unit was quite dysfunctional. I believe the father was having multiple affairs, as was the mother. The father energetically was more aggressive in like flaunting it to the wife and letting her know about it. The mother kept it more on the down low. She just kind of like did her thing on the side, wasn't like gross and overt about it, but was very emotionally tuned out and checked out because of the way that the father's perversion was being flaunted in her face. Now, interestingly enough, I actually saw that Armie had been locked up at some point, not like in jail. And I feel like it was done by a woman. I'm not saying it was the mother, I don't know, but energetically, he was put into a small space, very confined. I would even go so far as to say it was like a coffin, because his movements were very restricted and he felt as if he could not breathe. So this was a very key pivotal moment in his life in which he felt very out of control and very disempowered. In addition to that, because he was a very good-looking young man, I would say even starting at the age of 8, 9, 10, the father had these women that were constantly coming and going and in and out of his life. A few of the women noticed Armie and how attractive he was and was used sexually at a point in his life where A, he was too young to understand it, and B, in addition to that, it left him feeling very confused about these encounters. His first sexual encounters happened when he was A, way too young, and B, it was very transitory. So it's like, these women maybe were just finishing up with the dad. It sounds gross, I'm sorry. They were finishing up with like the dad, would be passing through the house, would notice him. And I mean, here's the thing, like the dad had like a kind of gross energy. So energetically, what kind of woman is the dad attracting? If that in any way, shape or form makes it a little bit more not understandable, it's still gross, but the energy of the father was gross. The people that he was engaging with these sexual acts in were gross. They were attracted. It was all this like grossness. So of course it's not like these upstanding women that were going to see a kid and be like, okay, hey, bye, whatever. They were engaging with him in sexually inappropriate behavior when he was way too young. He could not comprehend it. He could not understand it. He felt used. he was too young and he felt used, he felt debased. But then, like, also on the one hand, like, he kind of enjoyed it. So there was this brew, if you will, of all of this dysfunction in the household, on the one hand, that was being fed and bred into the children as well, where it was a very chaotic and out of control environment. And then you have this ugly energy of the father, ugly energy of the woman that were coming in and out of his house and in and out of his life, that was then passed on to Armie as well. Okay, so that's just kind of laying the groundwork of what was happening with Armie in his upbringing. Now, my understanding is that the Hammer family is quite well-to-do. Well-to-do people, it opens up the world energetically in ways that, you know, regular people just don't understand. So it's like beyond having these majestic vacations. It's beyond like flying first class. It's beyond like going to the best restaurants. There are certain things that can happen for people with great wealth that we regular folk will not have the opportunity to explore or experience because it's not meant for us. The more money somebody has, the less money actually means to them. And that was very much the case with the Hammer family as well. It's like, take people who have no money and take people who have the most money in the world. Money means nothing at that point, because if you have it, you can't do anything with it. And if you have all the money in the world, you've already done everything you can with it. So these things start to lose value, and these people start to look for other ways in which they can experience and explore the world that doesn't have to, that is a little bit beyond the scope of normal, right? It's not like I want to go to Paris and see the Eiffel Tower. It's not like I want to go to Mykonos. It's beyond that, because they've already done all of that. So there were these hunting parties in which people could go to, let's say, a far off location, and they could hunt animals. And it was done very like in the dark. It was very, it's not, because, you know, PETA would be all up in arms, and any animal advocates would be up in arms about this. So it was not like something that was publicly known. But if these very, very wealthy people wanted to have these hunting parties, they could have hunting parties with wild animal and other things as well. Now, Armie had a lot of chaos and rage inside of him. And he went on one of these hunting parties in which they were hunting bear. But he didn't want to hunt with other people. He wanted to hunt on his own. And I actually saw him dressing himself up. Imagine as if there was a zombie apocalypse, the way you would pad yourself. So he was wearing like a helmet with like the grill on it. I don't know, maybe like pitchers or catchers. He had like padding over here. He had padding like all over his body. And he had a baseball bat. And he wanted to go out and hunt these animals. And he was hunting bear. Black bear, brown bear, I don't know. But big ass bear. Not like the little cubs. He wanted to go head to head with the big boys, okay? The hunt was the thrill for him. He almost had no value placed in his own life. So he didn't care if anything happened to him, but he also was so enraged and had all of this pent-up anger and aggression inside of him that he wanted to get out, that it clouded his judgment and it clouded his thinking in terms of what could actually happen to him. And it was the only time that he actually felt alive, because there was the adrenaline, right? So he had learned to shut himself down at a young age. He had definitely been locked into something that was like a coffin, felt very out of control, had been used and misused by these transient women in his father's life. He had shut part of himself down. He felt very, very dead. When he went on the hunt was the only time he actually felt alive. There was a shit ton of adrenaline. I saw him literally like running through the woods with this rage inside of him, finding a bear, and then just starting to beat the living daylights out of the bear with a fucking baseball bat. He never felt more alive as he did at that moment when he was doing it. Interestingly enough, once he killed the bear, so it was a very all-encompassing experience. And so he had all the adrenaline, his blood was pumping like crazy. He could even hear, and I know you guys watching this have had these experiences as well, where you're somewhere and you might be so terrified that you actually can hear the blood pumping in your ears. So he had that where the adrenaline was so over the top, and he didn't just feel his blood pumping, he heard the blood pumping in his ears. And then once he had killed the bear, he felt the most peace that he had ever felt in his entire life. So the blood pumping in his body, that sensation disappeared. The sound of the blood pumping in his ears, that sound disappeared. All he was left with was complete peace. For the first time in his life, he felt peaceful. All he could hear was his breath coming out like jagged from the adrenaline, from the running. That was all he heard, and he felt all of the tension in his body disappear. So it was orgasmic for him. It was actually better than sex for him, because his very, very early introduction to sex didn't make sense to him and was confusing for him and felt, ugh. This was better than sex for him. And the release that he felt after he killed the bear was better than any sexual release he could have experienced. So that became his drug of choice. And he did not only kill the animal, but you know, like when somebody would go hunting, if they kill a deer, for example, they would do like a taxidermy of the deer head and they would like hang it on the wall. So his, what he wanted, his souvenir, so to speak, was he would cut out the heart and he would feel, he would hold the heart as it would stop beating, and felt powerful for the first time in his life as he would feel the heart stop beating in his hand. So with each of these hunting parties that he went on, with each of these experiences that he had where he would kill an animal that was much bigger than him, where the odds should have been stacked against him, with each of those experiences, he was energetically taking a step back and removing himself from that powerless little boy that he had been before. He was eradicating that experience with every encounter that he had with these animals, where he would kill them, where he would hold the heart and he would feel it stop beating in his hand. Okay, now let's move forward a few years in time. He gets married, and he has some children. I think he had two kids. He had these experiences of what he thought was love with his wife, and where he wanted to eradicate these needs that he had for killing these animals, and he wanted to be what he thought was the better, like a older, more mature version of himself. Oh, like there's a certain way that you're supposed to be when you're older and you have kids. And he felt like he had to stop and let go of these experiences that he had been having. And so he did stop. But it's kind of like the way I'm seeing it right now is like, imagine a soldier goes out to war and they have all of that adrenaline and they feel powerful and they feel brave, and then they come back home and then they lead completely ordinary lives. The dichotomy between it is so severe that they feel incongruent in their own life because of the previous experiences that they had before. So there's actually a great scene in, I forget the name of the movie, but it's with, what's his name? I forget his name. Don't take movie recommendations from me. But it was the movie version, Bradley Cooper, that's who it was. It was the movie version of the most prolific sniper in US history. And so it does a really great job, Chris Kyle, I think was his name. Anyway, so it does a really great job of showing, like, when he comes back home and he's, you know, a family man now, and I think it's one of his kids' birthday parties or something, and you can kind of see life happening around him, and he's sitting in his chair in the living room and replaying what it felt like to be in war. And now he's living a completely ordinary and boring life. So just as if you can have a war hero that can have that experience, Armie Hammer too also had that experience where he felt lost in his own life, and he felt, the word just keeps coming up, is incongruent. He felt incongruent in his own life. So and he did try to stop. Now there were periods in his life, and also here's the thing, he enjoyed doing some kink with his wife before they were married. Then she became, mother. She had his kids, and he felt like he had to shelf that. So the need for the release was starting to build up within him. So he felt out of place in his own life. He felt incongruent in his own life. The need was starting to build up. He didn't have an outlet for it. So I see very clearly there were times in his life, first of all, where or in his family's life, where his wife and kids would be asleep, he would leave the fucking house. And he tried like 1 or 2 times. He would go to a strip club. He felt very debased being in it. So what he actually would start to do instead is would drive around late at night or earlier in the morning, however you look at it, whatever the hours were. And he would see people out and about, and he would fantasize what he would do to them. So he started to have a very, very rich fantasy life at that point, where he turned much more in. His fantasy life was very, very rich, did not in any way, shape, or form compare to the banality of his ordinary life, being a family man with kids, with a wife. So his fantasy life was becoming very, very rich, right? And in addition to that, this pressure was starting to build up again in him, and he didn't have an outlet for it. I don't know what happened with his wife. I think they're probably divorced at this point. Energetically, he was not even showing me what happened in his wife. It's like he was trying to protect her and didn't want to share what had happened with them that led to the demise of the relationship. Like, I almost feel like he has not even come to terms with it within himself. He felt like a disappointment to himself, that he couldn't be this better man that he wanted to be, that he couldn't be the idealistic family man that he wanted to be, especially because of the way he had been raised in that very chaotic environment with the father that was like this gross energy, doing these gross, very, very gross things, putting it in the mother's face. So he really felt a lot of shame and guilt and embarrassment over the fact that he felt like he was no better than his father. So it was very, very shielded and hidden. he didn't want to look at it. He doesn't want to acknowledge it. It's like he compartmentalized it. He put it into a box, put it on a shelf, put it away. Now he felt free to pursue the things that he enjoyed pursuing. Now, he again had this very, very rich fantasy life that he had built up during the duration of his marriage. Was feeling debased in strip clubs, would never go to a prostitute. It was so beneath him. He really, really wanted willing participants. Here's the thing. Try going up to somebody and saying, "Hi, I'm gonna fuck your life up. But first, I'm gonna sell you this perfect vision of what you think could possibly be. But then when I have you hooked, I'm gonna fuck you up and I'm gonna fuck your life up." See how well that goes over. It's not gonna go over so well. So he understood intuitively the way in which he had to first come into somebody's life was this picture of this Hollywood celebrity, Armie Hammer. Again, he's very, very good looking, right? Piercing blue eyes, chiseled features, tall, statuesque, had probably lots of designer clothing. So he came in selling the fantasy of what it was going to be like with a Hollywood man. And then once he had these women hooked, he started to open the valve a little bit more and more in which he could start to release these fantasies. So when some of it was done for shock, let's just make that first of all very, very clear. When he said he was a cannibal and he acted like, "Oh fuck, I can't believe I'm saying this. I can't believe I'm like revealing that I'm a cannibal." That was fucking for show. Go back 5 minutes to the middle point of the video. He had already been killing animals. He had already been holding their heart as the animal was dying. Yes, he had eaten it. So that was more for shock value. He did it. He wanted to say it, not for himself, but to say it to the woman that he was saying it to scare them, to shock them, to make them feel like, holy fuck, this guy is fucking crazy. He liked keeping them energetically off balance. So he was saying it not for himself. He already knew who he was. He already knew what he enjoyed. He was perfectly okay with it. He said it to shock them. It worked, okay? The things that he had also shared about like he wanted to like rape his girlfriends, that was very, very real. He did want to do that because again, for years, he had been going out at night when he was playing family man, driving around, seeing women. I see it very, very clearly. He's in the car. There's a woman standing outside of a bar. She's wearing like these Daisy Dukes and like boots. And she has a shirt tied at her waist. She has very, very long hair. She's like standing outside, kind of like talking over a car hood at somebody else. And he's looking at her derriere. So he had this very, very rich fantasy life of things that he wanted to do. He wanted to do things to that woman that he saw perched over the car. But he wanted it with a willing participant. But he wanted it where he was in control of the willing participant because he felt, again, he was at war with himself, constantly at war. He came from a very well-to-do very financially well-to-do family. He had been raised in this kind of like sort of upper crust kind of environment. But again, it was a fucking shit show. His life as a child was a fucking shit show. It was like everything looked great from the fucking outside, but on the inside, it was complete chaos. So he very much felt this sense of like obligation. Things have to look okay from the outside. So he, within himself even, could not, there were things that he wanted to do, but he was not okay with even admitting it to himself. So yes, he wanted to, let's say, rape these women, but he wanted it to be with a willing partner, because if they were willing and they agreed to it, it assuaged his guilt that he felt in being this monster that he felt he was. So that is why he was doing it with these women that he would meet. But again, you can't say to somebody that you're meeting online, hi, I'm Armie Hammer. I'm going to fuck your life up. But first, I'm going to make you think that I'm the dream. So he understood the way that he had to come into it. It was selling the dream before he turned into the actual nightmare. He wanted these willing participants. He was a very, very torn, I don't know why I'm talking about him in past tense. He's a very, very torn character where he understands the obligations of how things have to look, but also because he came from an environment where it looked one way, but it was very actually perverse underneath, that is the core essence of who he is. It has to look one way on the outside, and it can be as perverse as it is on the inside. But they have to be willing participants in what I'm going to do to them. So he wanted, everything that he said is absolutely true. He wanted to, rape his girlfriends. He did for the perversity and the thrill. And this goes back to when he was doing these hunting parties where he was hunting the animals, where it's like there's a big secret, but only I know what the secret is. So he did want to have a body part of his girlfriend. I think I had read that he wanted her finger or something like that. He wanted that with him while he would go do press tours, because he liked the perversion of it. He liked that he would put a mask on while talking to these people and having these people think that he was the way he was presenting, right? Very statuesque. I'm going to keep saying it. I don't think there's people here that can agree, that will disagree. He's not good looking. He is good looking. He is statuesque. So he had this mask, and he really enjoyed the sick perversion, the pleasure in this idea that I'm going to have my girlfriend's finger. I'm going to have done vile things to her last night that nobody's going to know about except me and her. But she was a willing participant. Again, now I have a piece of her. I have her fucking finger with me. I left her locked up at home. She's tied to the bed. She can't get out. When I come back from doing this fucking press tour, I'm going to go back there and I'm going to fuck the shit out of her. So he had this, excuse my language, I'm sorry. I'm sorry if that's very triggering. His energy is a very debasing kind of sexual energy. So that's what he was thinking. But he loved the perverse pleasure in putting the mask on and pulling the wool down over people's eyes and having them see what he was presenting to them, having them see the mask and not knowing what he was really like behind the scenes, not knowing what he had done the night before, not knowing what he had in his pocket, not knowing what he was going to do when he got home to her. It was a very, very sick, perverse pleasure that he had. I'm also going to say this. So now that the cat is out of the bag and there's these women that have come forward and they've spoke about it and it's known, it's out there, right? He's almost okay with it being out there, because the real secret, that is still a secret. There's always going to be women that will debase themselves for a man. There's always going to be women who have low self-esteem and low sense of actual value in themselves, that the bad boy. So he's not even concerned about his image. He probably is even getting energetically, I think he's actually quite feeling it. There's a lot of women that would be very, very excited and willing to be these participants in these fantasies that he has. So he's not all that upset that the cat is out of the bag and that this is known. There's always going to be, look, Ted Bundy, after it was known what had happened, got married in jail, had a kid. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. The list goes on and on of these people that have done these heinous things, and there are still women that are going to be attracted to them. So he is like okay with that. What he was much more concerned with is that the secret of the hunting parties and what he had done to the animals, that would not come out. That touches him on a much deeper level than what was done with the women, right? The women, what was done with the women was kink. It was, this accumulation of feeling repressed when he was trying to play family man and not having an appropriate outlet for it. So he was okay with that for a while. But the true release of his valve was when he was hunting these animals. It was the adrenaline, it was the pursuit, it was the pomp and circumstances of how he had to go out of his way to protect his body with all of these different varying layers, with the fucking whacked helmet. That was his release. The hunting of the animals, the killing of the animal, the absolute euphoria, and more than that, it was complete stillness. The chaos that he felt in his own body and in his own mind. Prior to that, the build up of it, coupled with the adrenaline, coupled with the hunt, and then that massive release and the quiet and the peace, that to him is the secret that he always wants to keep, because that was his way of eradicating what had been done to him as a little boy. That's way more of the precious secret. And I actually even have a feeling if that came out for any reason, I think he would probably take himself off the earth plane, because that is so much more a private element to the core makeup of who he is than the kink, than what he wanted to do to women. That's private. It's like he's actually as much as he was shut down because of this chaotic environment that he had in his upbringing, he's actually a very layered person. I'm not saying good layered, I'm not saying bad layered, it's just an observation that he is a very layered person in his trauma. That's a better way of putting it. He's very layered in his trauma and how he has processed his trauma and how he has tried to deal with his trauma. It's very, very layered. Like, okay, so the kink is out there, but the animals, if that ever came out, that would be his actual undoing. It's so private to him. It's so much a core component of his effort to eradicate the chaos he felt as a child. It's a much more integral part in the layered privacy and the parts that he wants to keep private. So that is my reading on the energy behind the veil of Armie Hammer. Take what resonates and leave the rest behind. And as always, until next time, stay in the high vibration.